Hello, my name's Stephen Whitehead. I'm a recently retired advanced nurse practitioner in urology.
Hello Steve, thank you for joining us today. Would you be able to talk about your career pathway to date, please?
Right, at around about the age of 38, I was, up to then I was an engineer and worked for a specialist company that made computer flooring systems. But the company closed and I was looking around for something different. I didn't want to go back into engineering and look for something along that line. So, happy accident, I started to talk to this lady who was about my age at the time, who was starting a career as a student nurse. So I thought, wow, that's interesting. Didn't know anything about nursing, not the first thing really. I just kind of saw nurses as people who sort of comfort you, and I didn't really see them as being technical or practitioners at that time. But just from my experience as a child going into hospital, being looked after, if you like. So that's how I saw nursing. Didn't really realise how involved it was or anything like that. So I decided to make that my goal to get onto a training course. And I was advised that by someone I met at the local hospital to get into nursing, to do something, to show that I was interested. And at that time, there was a national agency who dealt with all recruitment, and so to really get it past them, I needed to start. So I went on a scheme actually. I was unemployed at the time. I went onto a scheme that they were running for unemployed people as a healthcare support worker at my local hospital. And I actually got a position in theatres there, and it was, for me, fabulous because, I don't know whether I should say this or not, but in theatres your face either fits or it doesn't. And I was very, very fortunate. I did fit in. I did was proactive in trying to help. And, nurses always like that. If you stand back and wait to be told or get stuck in, they like people to get stuck in, really. So I found that about nurses quite quickly. So I was working in theatres, and I ended up actually spending most of my time in orthopaedics because there was a nurse who was going off long-term sick. I wasn't trained, but the manager realised that I was able to get all the packs out, to put all the little pins and bolts and things and plates back in the kits ready to be sterilised. So I was useful in that case. So I stayed in orthopaedics quite a lot. And I spent 18 months as a healthcare support worker. And in that time, I applied to train. And I did the DC test at that time. Having got that, I was offered an interview rather, at Lincoln Hospital. I wanted to be back in Scunthorpe where I live, but I didn't get the opportunity, so I came to Lincoln, and it was really the best thing that happened to me. I came to Lincoln, had the interview, and was successful, and started on my training course. It was a diploma course. The early diploma courses that they just started, I forget the name of it. I forget, but it was a diploma course anyway. And I enjoyed every minute of it, really. I think because I was a mature student, I felt confident enough to say, I'd like to do this. I'd rather do this than that. For an example, when I did my community training, the senior nurse on the community, this was at Gainsborough, said to me that she'd got this highfalutin sort of agenda for me to do this, that, and the other, all very highbrow stuff. And I said, That's very kind of you. I can see you've been to a lot of trouble, but I don't want to do any of that. So she said, what? And she was obviously, sort of taken aback. And I said, look, I can discuss with you Kant's categorical imperative, but I said, I don't know how to put a bandage on. And I said, I want to do some grassroots nursing while I'm with you. I'd like to be able to do a bandage for a leg ulcer or something like that. And so she was absolutely delighted that that's what I wanted to do, and that's what I did. She put me with a nurse, and they set me goals, and that's what I did before I left. And it was a wonderful placement for me, and I think it was enjoyable for them because they all took me out for lunch on the last day, so it was a really good experience. And I had lots of good experiences. I had some negative experiences, obviously, that they come along, but in the main, and I think at that time there wasn't many men in nursing as well, so there was a few problems in that area. Nevertheless, it was on the whole, it was a massively positive experience for me, because I didn't know anything about nursing, you see, and I soon learned. And it was good because I wasn't, being older, I wasn't frightened of getting my hands dirty, and I went with the healthcare workers or the auxiliary nurses at that time to do basic care. So that's where I learned how to do patient basic care, which is invaluable, really. Even if as you qualify, you're maybe not involved in that as much, but if you know about it and you understand it, I think that gives you a great basis for carrying on with other sort of higher things, if you like, later on. So that was that, and as I was working towards my final couple of placements, I did get the opportunity to apply for a job on the emergency surgical admissions ward, and I was successful in getting an interview there, and I started on Marshall Ward, as it was then, at the county hospital at Lincoln. I have to say that I felt, when I first started, I thought, I've made such a massive mistake. I'm never going to be able to do this. I can't do this. I drove home every day thinking, I can't do this, because it was so much happening at once. There was so much activity, there was incident after incident. But I could see lives being changed because of the work we were doing, and you kind of stick at it. And the strange thing was, a few months later, probably only about 5 or 6 months later, my ward sister sent a student with me. I thought, she must be mad. I'm only a baby myself, and I've got this student with me. But it was amazing, because the student asked me a question, and I started to explain. And I explained the whole pathway to the student, and I thought, was that me? Was that me who just said all of that? I didn't realise how far I'd come in the 6 months. It was a massive, steep learning curve, but nevertheless, that's where I was, and it kind of encouraged me to think, yeah, I have moved on. So I got promoted from there. This about 2 years down the road, which is quite quickly, really, I got the opportunity to go to Manchester to train for a urology nurse, because the ward had changed designation from emergency to urology, because we'd got a new consultant in urology coming along, and they wanted dedicated nurses to support him. So I took that opportunity, because I saw a niche for myself working a lot with men, you see, in urology as well, because it's predominantly a male thing. And I did certificate in urology at Manchester University. When I'd finished that, it was marvellous, because there was an opportunity there to apply for a job as a nurse specialist in urology. So I obviously took took the opportunity and was successful in securing that post. And I was working with one of the girls I'd worked with on the urology ward, one of the girls who I started with as a student nurse. So it was, for me, amazing. And she took me under her wing. We started doing innovative stuff, and it went on from there, and on and on and on. Later on, I got the opportunity for one of the consultants to run a special clinic for him. He was doing a lot of radical cancer work, and the men were needing follow-up from that. So I began to do this clinic for this consultant, and was working independently. And from that developed. I became an expert, if you like, in that area, so much so that I was sought after to go and teach GPs and other doctors in this specialist area. So it started to blossom, it started to grow, and at the same time I was started to do other investigative work in urology, and that was new to this hospital. And that developed as well. So it was all nurse-led innovative stuff that I was being led into doing.
And actually that you led, and that you were the first in Lincolnshire to do so.
Yeah, that's correct, yeah. And it's gratifying to know that the nurses I trained in that are actually here now doing that work. Now I've left and carrying that work on. And it's all nurse-led stuff, so it's really gratifying to me that happened.
And very pioneering for yourself as a professional, but also for the hospital in terms of its innovative ways.
Yeah, it was great. And ultimately, I got the opportunity to do some endoscopy work, and it was being pioneered by the Association of Urology Doctors at that time, the consultants, to have nurse endoscopists, and it was very early days, and there wasn't actually a pilot or anything we could work to. So what we did was we developed a way in which I could become a nurse endoscopist, and I did 100 supervised cystoscopies, and I drew up an assessment tool for the consultant so that he could do a formal assessment and tick all the boxes to make sure that I was safe. And that's what we did. And I ended up doing check cystoscopies for people who have previously had bladder cancer. And then that developed again. It developed into me doing diagnostic work and interventional work, because I eventually started doing treatment and interventions for people who had reoccurrence cancers that could be dealt with in endoscopy. So I actually started doing all the kind of work that a middle grade urologist would be doing, and that was wonderful to me. That was an amazing step forward. I ended up probably doing more lists in that work than anyone else in the trust, because I was doing 4 lists a week, and I did over 7,000 cystoscopies before I'd retired. So it's been a marvellous thing. In fact, yesterday I had a phone call from an ex-patient who'd found out I'd retired, and he had cancer. It actually got prostate cancer and bladder cancer, and it was me that took him through all his treatments and checks, and he wants to take me out for tea as a thank you for the work that I did with him, because he was in a very poor state when I met him. A very worried man, but he's survived, and he's well, and he's just sort of grateful and wants to show his gratitude. So I think that's wonderful.
So what happened after that then? Did you go on to do any other things after nurse cystoscopy and things? As I say, I did some specialist clinics, I did some specialist investigations, I did the endoscopy, and then I came to the point where I was going to retire early. So I did retire early, but then as it happened, I found that I needed to work again because I'd found a wife and she was a foreigner, and I needed to work again to meet the immigration criteria for her. So actually it was wonderful because I was well known, I suppose, in Lincolnshire. I was successful in securing a specialist post. I was actually, yes. I did secure a post as a continence advisor in the community, and spent nearly another 4 years actually working before I finally retired at 65. So that was an amazing difference. Of course, I was running clinics in the community, calling at people's homes and etc., etc. But it was quite an experience for me. It was totally different to what I'd been used to. But again, I, because of my background knowledge and the support of my colleagues in the team, it was again, it's really an innovative work. So it was right up my street, if you like. Sort of, I've never got over that sense of being able to help someone. I don't think you ever. In fact, I'm doing it now. I met someone the other day and they wanted some advice. I couldn't help myself. It's a wonderful feeling to be able to meet someone in a clinic, to be able to give them the advice and perhaps treatment they need, for them to come back and for them to say, I feel so much better. Things are so much better since the last time I saw you. And it's great to have the confidence to say to someone, if you do this that I've advised you, when I see you again, you will be so much better, and have the confidence to know what you're telling them is going to work. So it's a great feeling.
So just to think about, in terms of your career pathway development, for those people that will be watching this right now, in terms of people that are thinking about embarking on different career pathways, or those that are just commencing their pathway, do you have any sort of advice for them going forward?
Well, I think what I would say is, and it's funny because I've got a friend who's just done that very thing. There was a social worker, and they've embarked on a nursing career as a mature student, and I've tried to encourage her and say that the sky's the limit. Basically, you have to be grounded, though. You have to learn the basics. You have to go to college, to school. You have to glean from experienced people. But the sky's the limit. Once you're there, you have to. If you choose a pathway, a speciality, whether it be cardiology or urology or care of the elderly, if you actually concentrate on that, and you can blossom and develop in that, and you can't help but move up, because the opportunities will come. It may take a while, but the opportunities come along, and if you're prepared yourself for that opportunity, then you can move along with it. It's a wonderful profession for the opportunities that it presents.
Perfect, thank you. And I'd just like to say thank you so much for coming out of retirement to talk to us today.
Pleasure.
On behalf of myself and ULHT, we really do value your input. Thank you.
Thank you.